Unplugged Borders, brought to you by Smota's Volcano Sauce.
Jesse. Do I get the towns right?
古海奇，你好。
你好，就不见了。
好久不见了啊！
你最近怎么样？
最近还好啊，就是没工作啊，疫情
没工作，
对，大家都死了。
对，每个人都一样。
对，就是观众都没了啊。
It would be so fucking freaky if we just did this whole thing in Mandarin and like the amount of people that like. Well, I guess with you it wouldn't be a problem, but for me, I'm just sort of when I try to make a podcast or a show, I just throw the net out. Like I just need the attention. But maybe a lot of people wouldn't realize I also speak Chinese, so it would just be.
It's a weird thing to incorporate back into your identity. Having returned from living in China, because in China it kind of makes sense, but here or in America or in Iceland or whatever, it's kind of weird because it's like, do I bring it up if I meet people? I spend a lot of time on it, but on the other hand, if it doesn't come up in conversation, there's really no way to bring it up.
yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, unless you're like one of those people who went backpacking in Southeast Asia for a few weeks and now that's all you talk about. That like becomes your whole identity.
It's funny because everybody like says like they returned from studying abroad or from traveling and like nobody wanted to hear their stories. Maybe it's because I did comedy, but I never found that to be the case. Like I found people were always very interested in hearing stories about learning Chinese and doing Chinese comedy. So
yeah, I mean, of course, even today, China is so far removed. I think there was like a window. I would say like after the Olympics and until Winnie the Pooh took over, where there was like this window of just expat relation, China, West glory. It was just a really nice, comfortable time. Yeah. And I think everything just kind of like it's obviously, we point the finger to China. This is one of the things that always bugs me about the way we discuss U.S.-China relations and the U.S.-West relation or the China-Western relations is that we always like for us, for the U.S., you'd say like, oh, you distinguish the Republican Party from the people. You distinguish the Democratic Republican Party, whatever. You would make these distinctions because you wouldn't say, well, America is like this. I mean, some people do, but you obviously realize there's a distinction. When we talk about China, for some reason, it's okay to say, we just say, oh, it's China. And then we just put that umbrella over the Communist Party of 100 million people, the 1.5 billion whatever Chinese people live there, and it's just that's the oversimplified view of China.
It's obviously way more complicated than that, and like it is like you say. I think part of the problem is just not enough people have gone there. It's like if you in America, like you grow up and Asian American people, and so the borders are already getting broken down in your mind. But in, a lot of places, if you don't have a lot of Asian American people around, or if the only Asian American people that you see are like, ones on TV, maybe you don't have an idea who these people are. So it's a lot easier to say like, oh, that's who they are. That's what they're doing. And it's like, if you don't like live with other cultures, like it's not actually part of your life. It's all just this big, it's like a movie script. Like people are like, well, China's making moves in the South China Sea. And I'm like, unless you literally are involved with that being part of your life, you discuss it like it's like a story point in a big movie script when actually it's, it's far more complicated than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that obviously, and we know from living in China that it's not just, with the government, it's with the entire society. I mean, China is, the way I would describe it is controlled chaos.
Yeah,
I think the analogy, like for anyone who's been to Beijing, the inner part of Beijing is called the Hutongs. They're sort of the old area, I guess. What would the Western?
The old town.
Old town, yeah. So you go to Europe, you go to these old towns, you'll see the old cathedrals, all the old cobblestone stuff. That China, Hutongs are the Chinese equivalent of that. And
hold on, my brother is very frustrated and he can't get into the kitchen. What's going on?
Are you filming something?
Yeah, I am. What's going on? Ben's Ben, tell your frustration to the podcast host, Helgi.
Hi, Helgi.
Hey, Sorry. Ben. How you doing? Yeah, sorry about this, man. We're doing.
Back here and
get a drink.
back here too.
It'd be interesting.
I'm gonna eat back. Let me just go back there to eat.
You're-
I'll be.
You got to go into the other office unless
Yeah,
because I'm
let
going to
me
be
know
recording.
unless you-
Let me. Ben had a lot of very important plans that got messed up by the recording.
It's not just.
Very important.
I'm just.
This is COVID. This is COVID time, man. You know, I had my own comedy club not that long ago where I would have shot this sort of thing, and
Oh,
now I'm in my
yeah.
own kitchen.
Did you have any Icelanders appearing on that comedy club?
We did have an Iceland-only day at the U.S.-China Comedy Center, and we had the Icelandic ambassador there.
That's right. Yeah, I do recall something of that nature. I mean, if anything shows just how, I guess, I don't know. I mean, if anything shows how small this world is, it's that an American kid from Boston speaking Chinese with an Icelandic kid from, well, Iceland, organizing a comedy show in Beijing. Yeah, I mean, there's something beautiful to that. And
there is. Well, here's the question. Like, did COVID kill this? Is it coming back? Or was that the peak that we're going to be at for the next, 15 years of internationalism? That show.
Yeah.
I'm not saying in general. I mean that show.
Oh, you
the
mean
Icelandic show? Was that the peak? Or
it'll be like the 36 Olympics, when Jesse Owens, showed what the world could be like if it wasn't run by dickheads.
Yeah, and then that didn't pan out. But I mean, there's the thing. It's like for people that live internationally, right now it's very, very obvious because we can't physically travel, so it's difficult to do that stuff. But even before that, we were on a backswing of populism all over Europe, all over America. And people, real Americans don't leave America. That sort of
right. Yeah, no, I think Fareed Zakaria had a really good take on this. He was saying that COVID didn't really change the world. All it did was accelerate the changes that were already happening. So Trump didn't happen on its own. I mean, there was this sort of, even in Europe, Viktor Orban, Erdogan in Turkey. I mean, there is this rise of sort of nationalism. I think it's just a general trend historically that, the more liberal the world starts getting, you start getting more mass migration, more interconnectedness, and humans obviously are tribal by nature. So as soon as there's a backlash, which inevitably always is, because that's just how, it's just how the world works.
It's a pendulum.
It's a pendulum swing, right? And so then, as soon as the the liberalism dies down, you'll get a wave of nationalism, and of course, added onto it, a global pandemic where everyone's pointing fingers and trying to start World War III.
On those men. Did you want to do an intro and explain who I was, or
I should probably do that. I should probably. This is one of the things that when you start doing podcasts,
this is one of the notes
friends,
you got. They're like, "Wow, it was good to go immediately into the demented rant, but maybe you should have just set it up a little bit."
Yeah, there's so for those of my listeners who are unaware, and if you are unaware, shame of you, you should know who this person is. This is my friend Jesse Appell, stand-up comedian from Boston who speaks Chinese, and he has done stand-up comedy in English and Chinese, mostly Chinese. That's
it's been most of my work.
Yeah, you've done stand-up comedy, not only traditional Western style stand-up comedy. You've also made a bit of a name for yourself doing what's called脱口秀.
Yeah.
Or danshen. What was it? Danko xiangsheng, right?
Well, there's 脱口秀. So in China, 脱口秀 is basically just the alliteration of talk show. So it's like, anything where there's talking and it's a show, they call talk show. So that includes stand-up. That includes Trevor Noah type, desk routines. It used to include Ellen, what we would call talk shows in America. But basically I did stand-up in Chinese. And then I also studied a traditional Chinese style of comedy called xiangsheng, or crosstalk comedy, which is kind of like an Abbott and Costello vaudeville-esque, two-man comedy routine where you have a straight man and a joker. You go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and have this comic dialogue. So my the last 8 years have been spent doing the Chinese comedy, mostly in Chinese, although I do have an English set as well.
So you, but the main sort of emphasis you've always wanted to go on has been traditional Chinese xiangsheng crosstalk.
Well, I did xiangsheng. I love xiangsheng because it's it's so cool to come to a place like China, and the history in China is so long that you can have these art forms like crosstalk, which are relatively new and have been around for 150 years. And so, but the cool thing about it is it's like real. Like in America, if you liked like vaudeville style comedy, like old time radio, hey, what are you doing over there? Like you could do it, but it'd be fake. Everybody knows that you're doing it for some sort of weird like kick, like you like it. But in China, it's like actually real. Like people know who the master performers are, and they'll go and pay real money to go to a tea house and watch a comedy show with two people in robes. And so the fun of being a crosstalk performer was to do something that was like comedy, which is what I love, but in such a different way, and have it not be like a Renaissance fair type feel. It was like real. So that was the fun part of that. But being a white person doing crosstalk, you can only get so good. Like they're not looking at me expecting to see the best crosstalk show they've ever seen in their life. They're trying to see like, oh, like can he even say the words right? So the expectation for me is a little bit lower than it would be for, say, a Chinese crosstalk performer.
Yeah, but I mean, I've seen you perform crosstalk for a while. I mean, you're very well versed in it. You've been doing it for a long time. I mean, you worked with Godegang, right? The sort of Louis C.K. of crosstalk in China.
Yeah, I've been on shows where he's like the celebrity judge. I haven't performed with. Well, I performed next to him. He was on stage next to me while I was performing. So maybe I don't know if that's with. With is really an idea, isn't it? But I have performed next to him, and I apprenticed to Ding Guangquan, who is my master teacher there. I apprenticed for 6 years. To Master Ding from 2012 until he passed away in 2018. So, I did a lot of crosstalk shows. And honestly, in America, with this pandemic going on and not having been on stage for 7 months, I'm like really wishing I could do more crosstalk right now, because I haven't performed it in months.
No, but I mean, you're probably still pretty fresh. I mean, one of my favorite things was watching you. I guess it's sort of I mean, how would you describe crosstalk in the sort of sense of the material? Because I remember one of the bits that you did was you name off a bunch of dishes or name off a bunch of different countries, and it seems to be that it's not the bit, it's not the punchline, it's just that, wow, this person can say things really quickly.
Yeah, well, they have, so the way like a good crosstalk show, in the way the Chinese audience looks at it is that the crosstalk performers, they have like 4 skills. They have 说学逗唱. So 说 is speaking, 学 is like imitating, 逗 is joking, and 唱 is singing. So my master would always say the whole point of all 4 of them is to make 逗, the joke, work well. So the point is to do jokes, but you have different ways of doing jokes, and it's not necessarily just about laughs per minute. So like 学, like imitate, like, that's where the accent comes in. That's where playing characters, like in stand-up, if you say like, you don't go on a show and stand up and say, and then my mom got really angry at me. And then I said, Mom, what are you doing? And then my mom said, I don't believe that this really your girlfriend. You would play all the characters. You'd be like, I'm so angry. You're like, what did I do wrong? That's not your girlfriend. That like we're
it's like a one-man show almost.
Yeah. So like that skill and stand up is used in imitation, and it's there in the comedy too. So that would be a skill. And what you were talking about were these things that they call guangkou, which are these like little monologues where they rattle off a lot of things to show the shuo, the speaking skill. So it's like, people ask you like, Jesse, where did you go? Like, 你去过哪些国家? And I'll say, oh, well, I just came back from, 韩国、朝鲜、日本、蒙古、越南、印度、缅甸、老挝、新加坡、菲律宾、尼泊尔、印度尼西亚、孟加拉、亚美尼亚、斯里兰卡、冰岛、丹麦、瑞典、芬兰、波兰、捷克、德国、法国、奥地利、乌苏、乌克兰、爱尔兰、匈牙利、南斯拉夫、摩尔多瓦、比利时、爱沙尼亚、克罗地亚、玻利维亚、阿尔巴尼亚，还有贝尼、埃及、多哥、刚果、马利、坦加、康摩、摩洛哥、冈比亚、冈利亚、赤道、肯尼亚、澳大利亚、新西兰、萨尔瓦多、尼日利、洪都拉斯、墨西哥、美国、加拿大。And then all the people would go, oh, it's good.
Dude, he rattled off those countries in a matter of seconds without any cocaine.
Yeah, and then, this is all no cocaine. I did have somebody after a show once. I remember this. It was like a friend of a friend, like a good friend of mine. He brought a friend of his to a show, see me for the first time. And then I asked the person, I'm like, how do you think the show was? And the only thing they told me is like, I really would like to know what you're like on cocaine. Because if you're like this now, What the hell would you be like on cocaine? That's what he told me.
Would like I think it would
No.
just be like a Back to the Future thing. It would be your equivalent of hitting 88 miles an hour.
What two gigawatts? You know, whatever. Like, I got jokes. I'm a Chinese comedian, man. I do jokes in Mandarin. They pay me money for that. Where's my?
I'll just go back in time to the 50s and yeah. But I mean, he'd probably answer this 100 times. But I think it's interesting to because I sometimes, you know, I told me this before, but I can't wrap my head. Like, how did this start for you? I mean, you were a Fulbright scholar, right? You just start from the beginning.
So in the beginning, God created the heaven. No, what happened was I was always kind of like the class clowny type dude, but I was also always interested in languages. Like I remember when I was, I remember specifically with China when I was like 9 or 10. I had this old atlas that my dad had, and it listed at the end of the book there were all these like lists, and it was like most spoken languages in the world, and it was like Mandarin, 1 billion people, and I was like, how is it possible? Like there's like, 3 times as many Mandarin speakers as English speakers. Like, wouldn't it be really cool to speak Mandarin? Like you could speak with like a sixth of the world right there. And so it always seemed like it would be interesting for me to, to speak another language and go and like, use other people's money. It's like, like living abroad seemed like it would be a really cool adventure. And when I was a kid, it was just kind of that. And so, but that meant that when a lot of people in America complain about being forced to take languages in school, but I actually really liked speaking languages because it was fun. It was a good challenge. And it was, I enjoyed it. And so I took Chinese actually starting in high school, although my 4 years of high school Chinese got me out of 1 semester of college Chinese. And so, and I did 2 years of college Chinese before I applied to study abroad, and I went to Beijing to study abroad for my junior year. And all that Chinese, including the 2 years of college Chinese, and I got to China and I could understand nothing. It was like nothing. It was like, it was actually in some ways of negative help because the people who were starting for the first time had no bad habits to break. And I had just nothing but bad habits because all my teachers had just never corrected me. So, but it was good. The study in America, I kind of had these 2 things that I did separately. I did improv and a little bit of stand-up. I did many, many years of improv comedy all through high school and college. And then in college, I studied language and I studied culture. And I never put the 2 together until it was actually like, really, it was the last week of my study abroad in Beijing. I was there 6 months studying Chinese, and I did like no comedy stuff. And then the last week I found out that there was a Beijing improv workshop. And so I went to the Chinese improv workshop, and I was just like blown away because I would see comedy stuff that like every word was different and it looked really different, but it was like the same thing as the comedy that I watched in America. There was a scene I remember from that first day where it's just an improv scene, and there was a traveler and he runs across like the Buddha, and he asks for life advice from the Buddha, and he just gets horrible life advice. That was the scene. And I was like, you could do that exact same scene with Jesus on the cross. Like the exact same scene. You wouldn't even need to change any of the punchlines. The point is there's something comedic about that setup of the person and the religious figure that the jokes all work, and they could all use entirely different words and it could be the exact same joke. And that was like fascinating to me. So that was kind of in the back of my head when I was looking for ways to get back to China after graduating. And I was thinking like, what would I was thinking like, what would I want to do in China in my free time? Because I figured if I could find a way to do professionally whatever it is I wanted to do for fun, that would be great. And so I thought I would want to definitely do more of the Chinese comedy stuff and keep doing the improv and the comedy that I was doing in America just for fun in China. And when I found the Fulbright grant's the U.S. International academic exchange program. So American scholars go to other countries to study their culture, and then their scholars come to study America. You can basically apply to research whatever you want. And so I applied to research Chinese comedy by studying crosstalk, the xiangsheng, the traditional style. And I was lucky enough that I had a mentor of mine, who's a teacher in China named Mo Dawei, is David Moser. Is originally from Oklahoma, but he spent 40 years now in China. David Moser was one of my comedy master's first disciples, back with Dashan and all the famous foreigners learning crosstalk in China, is one of the earliest people to study this. So he said.
So for those who don't know, Dashan is the sort of he was the first sort of, I guess, white guy who got famous in China for speaking Chinese.
Yeah, and he was famous specifically because he did like comedy routines on the Chinese New Year's Gala, which like 1 billion people watched the TV show. So, Dashan, arguably has more fans than any Western comedian anywhere. Like if you tallied them by number, he's probably has more fans than, Chris Rock or whatever. But that's just a numbers game. But my point being that I happen to be connected to this amazing teacher who spent his life doing Chinese comedy and teaching Westerners how to do Chinese comedy. And he said that if I could get the scholarship, that he would teach me how to do it. And I got the scholarship. And so that was the start of doing comedy kind of as a career, was that I had a year's worth of time where I was researching comedy, which means you just go on stage and do jokes and see what the hell happens.
That's a great thing. You just convinced an entire scholarship to fund your comedy career. Doing
I really think I really think one of the best. I don't want to say advantages. I think it is an advantage. But like one of the ways that why I've been happy about doing what I'm doing is that I've always kind of spread out the financial risk. Like over the 8 years that I've been doing Chinese comedy, I've kind of had like 3 to 4 of those years covered by different fellowships or scholarships. So even though I haven't gotten a degree out of it, I still don't have like a grad degree or anything like that. Like, I had my rent paid and like was able to do what I do for free, basically, for like half of the time I was doing it. And so while you never know if you're going to win the next grant, it definitely was really good, because a lot of comedians, the biggest problem at the end of the day is like you work a day job. It's really hard to write because your brain is full of all that other stuff. And then it's really hard to quit the day job, because comedy is such an unstable and work environment. If you're smart enough to have a day job, you're also smart enough to see that it's a really hard road to make a living off of comedy. So you don't do it. But the benefit of being a comedian is, I live my own life. I get to control my own hours. I do what I want with my time. I get,
as long as you're getting paid for it.
And then I get paid for it sometimes through the fellowships. But then, in the last year, I went on some big TV shows and had some breakthroughs and got a bunch of fans on the Chinese social media. And so I started getting like ads from GE and Alipay. And so like it would not have been worth, it's like from a money perspective, it wouldn't have been worth 8 years worth of work to get a couple ads. But this year I got some ads, and so that'll get me through 2020. And then the year before it might have been a fellowship, and the year before that it might have been doing shows on cruise ships. It's like, it's all kind of worked out.
Well, that at the end of the day, that's what a lot of comedic, especially the people who are just starting out in comedy, they always, and I guess you could put this into perspective with every genre of art, is that you always think that there's going to be this threshold called your big break. And it's not really that. It's just, it's always on the shoulders of the last thing you did. And then it just slowly builds up.
Yeah. And it's also a mentality. It's like the hard thing about doing comedy for a living is that you always have to hustle, but that actually is good because it keeps your comedy fresh. Like if you didn't have to hustle, you probably wouldn't make good comedy,
very few, rich kids, I guess, like kids who, grew up in the Hamptons and, because there's nothing to relate. Comedy is, you have to be able to relate. The audience who shows up needs to be able. There's a great, did you watch the Louis shows where Jerry Seinfeld asks Louis to come to the Hamptons and do like a benefit gig? And Louis just shows up in a black T-shirt and jeans, and Jerry Seinfeld's getting all mad. He's like, "Louis, seriously, man, look at you."
Where is dude, Louis? I haven't seen.
What are you doing?
What are you doing this to me, Louis?
I'm dead. And then he goes to the security guard and borrows his red blazer, and he just gives it. He's like, "Here, put this on." And then he goes on stage and just bombs. And then Jerry Seinfeld follows him, and he's doing this whole bit about, "Yeah, Louis, that was great. He's wearing the jacket of his next job." And then he does a joke about, yeah, golf is hard, just like throwing a TikTok into a shoebox, and everyone laughs because they're all rich. But Louis had bits about like, oh, well, I was at a store the other day. Well, you guys probably don't know what that's like. You probably have slaves who do it for you. And I think one of the reasons I like that scene is because, if you go to the Comedy Store in LA or you go to the Cellar, you're not going to see people doing shows who are of the Hampton crowd. They're not just, it's not going to work. It's blue collar people in the audience. You need to be able to relate to them somehow.
Sure. But I think that this is also something that I've been like discovering, is because I started my comedy career in Asia, there was always this part of me that felt inadequate compared to the type of people that could do that, because like, it felt bad. Like I would go back and I would do shows at like colleges in America, but I wouldn't be doing clubs because I would get paid by a college to come in and do a show. And then rent is so expensive in America, like, hotel rooms and stuff. I can't just like, dick around for a week and do club shows. Like when I was in America, I would do like a show here, stay one night, go to the other places. And I had meetings sometimes that I would have like dinner with like a comedian from the local scene. And I would be like, I feel really bad about it that I can, like, I'm getting paid to do comedy and like doing things in like a college, but it's like not a real show. And I'm getting paid. Meanwhile, there are hilarious comics in the underground scene that can relate to that audience, like the club audience. And she said like, look, like, you relate, some people relate to you, some people relate to other people. Like, it's not a fake show just because it wasn't at a club.
Yeah.
But I personally feel like, especially as a comedian, if you really want to take that on, like I really wish there were shows right here in Boston that I could just go to the local club scene and see what the hell I could do, because I feel like I'm still scared of it, like performing in the American clubs in English. Even if I can do it, I'm still like, because I've done it before, but like every time I go up, I'm still like scared of it.
Yeah, but you have a niche. I mean, this is one. Okay, I kind of know what you say, because what you mean, because a lot of my friends, when I moved back from China, some of my friends were saying, well, you should talk about China more. And I said, well, I really can't, because the material that we used on stage in Beijing, it doesn't relate. I mean, what do people know?
This is kind of the market question versus like the, I think we have some sort of platonic ideal comedian in our head that it's like, they perform for the American audience or the regular audience. Mm-hmm. But like, if I were to do a show in Boston right now, if I just put out tickets, like, 70 to 75% of people would either be Chinese American, or people like me that like lived abroad, right? Like, you're not, in the practical sense, there's so many great shows in this country. If you were to put on a show, like, who are these randos that are going to be walking through the door and paying money to see, forget even free, who's going to take a night of their time to go to see somebody they've never heard of? So it's kind of like a non-question. It's like, I draw a certain type of person, like, to them, they find me relatable. Like, I can do a lot of work to try to be relatable to other people, but, in comedy, you can't fake that. If people aren't buying it, they aren't buying it.
I think you stepped in on something really interesting, which is that everyone, I guess in comedy, we always think the grass is greener on the other side. You're just saying that, you're putting out a 70-80 theater. That's going to be sold out because you'll have the Chinese audience served to you on a platter. They'll know who you are. They've seen your stuff. They're coming to see you. They know your Chinese material. Yet again, comedians who will have more of a relation, who have been in the grind, perhaps at comedy clubs, and who do have a lot of relation to the audience, who, could be from anywhere in the Northeast. They might have a tough time selling, 70 or 80 seats.
Yeah. Well, and this is a thing that's really been, comedy is kind of interesting because on one hand it's universal. Like, everybody loves to laugh. Like, there's 10 people who hate laughing, and they all are like in the front row of my show. But other than that, like, everybody loves to laugh. And so on one hand it's universal. On the other hand, as you were talking about with your Louis analysis of like, rich people think certain things are funny, and blue collar people think certain things are funny, and like, Icelandic, international, whatever, State Department people think something's funny. Like, there's no end to how niche a joke can get. I mean, you can have a joke that's only funny for you and one other person. Sometimes you have a joke that's only funny to you.
That was my last special.
Yeah, exactly. And so there is no limit to how niche it can go, but it's also common humanity. So the fun part of that is that what I found is when I make something for people, something that, it's comedy for me, I just made a joke or I made a funny music video because I thought it was funny. Sometimes if you hit just the right person, you really reach them because it shows that there are other people like them in the world, because this couldn't have been made for everybody. It had to have been made just for someone like you. And so to see that, even though I look different from a lot of Chinese people, to see that something that was made just for them, or for people like me that are Americans learning Chinese, that they see a white guy making jokes in Chinese and it's just for them, it really touches people. So if your goal is to make people happy and laugh, I've kind of come to accept that it's not everybody's going to be the Louis C.K., not everybody's going to be the there for everybody comedian. And that's okay, because it's what would be much worse would be to pretend to be that person your whole life. Because then you would bomb all the time. You'd be you'd get really bitter and you're why doesn't everyone like me? And the truth is nobody is liked by everybody. And even the people like Seinfeld that have a really big audience base, there's a certain type of person that likes Jerry Seinfeld. It's just that because he's been out there millions and millions and millions and millions of times, more people have found him, and that niche is large enough. But not everybody likes Seinfeld, Yeah. And so it's like that with everybody. So it's just a matter of I think it's a matter of finding out who you are and not bullshitting yourself.
That's a good point, because I think so many. Okay, the idea of you can get on stage and you'll tell a joke that I had a few jokes when I started out that I didn't realize why they were funny, but for some reason they just kept getting laughs, so I just kept sticking to it. There's one, obviously telling a joke that lands well, killing is such a great feeling, but what's even better than that is killing with a joke that is so yours, that is so your niche, your style of comedy. Because as soon as I think there was Doug Stanhope has this story where he gets on stage and he starts doing a set, and he was at a college and people just started walking out. And then I think originally it was 100 people, 150 people in the audience. And then one by one, they just started leaving, and there was 15, 20 people left. And at the end, he was those are the people I'm doing the shows for.
Yeah. And the cool thing about the internet is that it allows you to just go to those 10 to 15 people and pack the room, so to speak, whether it's a digital room or whether it's a real room, with just those 10 to 15 people, but you find 10 groups of those people. And the laughter is weird. If you go to a comedy show and only 10 out of 150 people are laughing, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad comedian.
No, it might you're not there. Yeah, you're not there.
You need to get those 10 people into a room by themselves, and you need to find other people like them and have them bring their friends. And then you could find out that you're actually really good, and it might actually not have to do with the material. Of course, usually if you're doing 150 people and only 10 laugh, usually it's because you suck.
That's
usually.
Well, what I want to know is, how did the sucky comedian get 150 people to show up in the first half?
Who the hell knows? I mean, this is the interesting reason why, me and you, having spent time in the Beijing scene, why, even though it was such a weird scene, ironically, it was a fantastic scene to learn it.
It was. I think it was so great because, people, first of all, they get very surprised when you tell them that, China had comedy. And I mean, I was even surprised just how big the scene was. I mean, Hot Cat Club in Beijing, when I moved there in 2014, which is when I first started out, every Wednesday night, I mean, you remember those nights, they were packed. Yeah. I mean, Joe Wong showed first night. I was sitting next to Joe Wong. I was I literally just saw this guy roasting Joe Biden 2 months ago on the internet. And now he's just sitting here and we're talking and he's about to do a set, and then I'm going to go do a set. It was an amazing experience. And I lived in Wudaokou, which is in the northwestern part of Beijing, and the shows that we used to do at Hot Cat Club was in the center of town. So I'd get every single week, I'd get on that subway. I'd ride I think it was line
45 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, it was like 45 minutes. I'd have to change.
Line 13 to line 2.
Line 13 down to Shijimen, then from Shijimen take line 2 down to Andingmen. And yeah, I mean, for what, a 4-minute set, but I did it every week. I just loved it so much. And obviously we had a good party afterwards, but it was, I mean, even more so than I think a lot of the music scenes. I mean, improv was obviously big in Beijing as well, but I think that was those weekly comedy nights. They were always packed. They were always the lineup was like 20 people, and it was just it was like a cult meeting, obviously.
Well, it was great. There was great energy, and it was a sort of place where you didn't need to work for 5 years to get in front of a real audience and see whether stuff worked. There's something beautiful about the way that the comedy scene come up works, where like usually the mics you get to go on in the beginning of the scene are so shitty, and it's like, 2 a.m. and there's like 4 people there, 2 of them are on their phone, and like one of them's on coke, and then like it's like, this is what I've heard from the American scene, is like, this is what doing comedy is like. But if you can make those 4 people laugh, you can really do it. The next question is, can you relate to a bigger audience? But that's an easier question to solve. The Chinese scene was really weird, and I'm talking specifically about the Chinese language comedy scene, because stand-up got popular in a country where there were no stand-ups. There were like 20 of us doing Chinese comedy, like me and like 19 Chinese people. But because it came from the West, and at the time in 2012, 2013, when I got there, when stand-up was just starting, people would see like The Daily Show, or people would see like, comedy clips come through, and they wanted to see it, but of course they didn't speak English, so the Chinese comedians would step into the fold, including the TV hosts, like the people who are like Chinese comedians on TV. But these were people that started doing stand-up in front of a camera on TV already, having never done it before. And so you had all of these people that if they had to go to that comedy club where there were 10 people and there were only 5 of them watching and the other 5 were on their phone and somebody was talking in the front row, they couldn't do it. They couldn't cut it. But in America, like by the time you see a Stephen Colbert on TV, he's doing a monologue. Yeah, he has writers, but he could do it all himself. He did improv. He did sketch. He can do stand-up.
Yeah, they put in the grind already. I mean,
they put in the grind, and it's not a time thing. It's like you do it as long as you need to until you can actually do it. And then only then in America will you get opportunities. And so in China was the opposite of that. You had these people who couldn't do it, but they had all the resources. And the beginning of the stand-up scene in China, actually, part of the reason it took years for stand-up to get popular in China is because all of their popular comedians weren't funny when they shifted the format, and people just didn't buy it. Obviously was that censorship? Because you think about the shows that we were doing at 69 Cafe down on Nanluo Guxiang. I mean, that was all Chinese language. That was 100% Western stand-up. And the people there, I mean, they were funny. I mean, Dashan showed up. We'd have Tony Cho obviously killing it every week. You were doing great, and it was. I don't know. I feel like, I mean, it's probably like a cocktail of things. It's a new art form, and obviously China. I keep saying it's not a different country; it's a different world. So the way they tell it, it's just a completely different. They laugh at different things. They tell jokes differently. But I've always wondered, like, censorship has to be a part of it too. I mean, it's a part of it. The biggest part that I felt censorship in the Chinese scene has been that everybody knows that there's no professional future in doing anything that runs counter to the long arc view of the party. So there weren't people that were doing political jokes, not because you couldn't do 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, not because you were going to be black bagged and thrown into a sack. It's just you're not going to get funding. If you get funding, the show might be, your boss is going to be nervous. If your boss is nervous, they're not going to extend it. If, you can never make a mistake, and everybody is just worried. And you don't want to live life worried. If you have a kid and you have a wife, your wife doesn't want you to be pitching a show idea that if it works, will get you in trouble. And so as a result, it's the long, it's a lot of these decisions where if you're 60% I don't want to do it, 40% I do, but then you have 500 little decisions like that, you wind up with a fraction of 1% of people doing anything that goes contrary to the party line. And so it's mostly self-censorship in that way. That being said, I was like a writer on like a Chinese version of SNL where we did like, every week we had a celebrity guest and I had to write sketches and put them in stuff. And we did have sketches that actually just got straight up censored. Like, it does happen, but that's very rare.
Was one of them, jokes you were telling about Uyghurs going to concentration camps?
No. Not even that. I mean, I had a joke. I was going to play Mark Zuckerberg in a sketch I wrote, and I'm still pissed I couldn't do that because it was perfect. I had a white guy. I was a white guy. Mark Zuckerberg even speaks some Chinese, so it was kind of even justified.
He speaks a little Chinese.
But like the point is, it's like the biggest problem I had on that Chinese knockoff SNL is there are no roles for white people. Like even in America where Kenan Thompson was the only black cast member for a long time. Like you can play a black mailman or a black dentist or a black whatever, and like the audience doesn't think that's the weirdest part of the sketch. But if I was just playing literally just a random dude, like if I wrote a sketch about three friends eating pizza and two of them are Chinese and one of them's a white guy and we don't justify it, that's the weirdest part of the sketch.
Really?
And,
so they're like, we don't associate with those people.
Yeah, like I would write sketches where I played just like a character, and if they didn't work, I was always like, well, is that why? And then if they did work and the directors liked them, they would just recast me.
I think that really goes, that really says something about China. This is what I was going to ask you, is that you feel like because you're a white foreigner in China doing these shows and this comedy stuff, like there's obviously always going to be a ceiling for you based on nothing more than you're not born there and you're not Chinese.
I don't know if it would be a ceiling, because that kind of implies you can't get high in the world there as a foreigner, which is, I don't know if that's true or not. It may be true, but I think what I mean is there are certain avenues that are blocked to me.
Right.
There are certain types of comedy that it's not a matter of my skill. I just will never be able to pull off because, think half of it's the comedian, half of it's the audience. If there's something that's going on with the audience and the way they look at the world, there's literally nothing I can do as a comedian to change that. I can only play off of it. And, as a comedian, you never get anywhere denying the audience is how it is. Like, you don't want to be one of those comedians like, the audience fucking sucks. Like,
sometimes they do. But
even if they do, so what? It's like your job. That's why you get paid to do this, and they pay you to do it, is because if they fucking suck, you have to find a way to entertain them still, or just don't show up. But don't complain about it. That's the way I look at it. So, like, if it's a free show and they didn't pay and you didn't pay, then what's one thing. But if you're like, this is what I do for my job, then like, you got to figure it out. It's like, if you're a teacher,
you have to dance, monkey dance.
Yeah, if you're a teacher and you have crazy parents, like, you can complain about it, but at the end of the day, it's like that's why you get paid, to deal with the shit. It's
it's a good point. I just, because, I remember you mentioning that, it's like about the casting. It's like, you can only play, the white guy who he can't eat the Chinese food, or, because that's their worldview. I mean, do you think that's ever going to change? I mean, is China ever going to become, reach this level of homogeny where it's, actually we have, okay, let me put it this way. If there was a sketch taking place on TV in Guangzhou, and it was an African, because Guangzhou has 350,000 Africans who live there. Would that be considered weird? Are they integrated?
It's all about context. It's like if you had if I was pitching a sitcom, and and I pitched a sitcom, like in Guangzhou, you pitch a sitcom or whatever, and the sitcom takes place in Africa town, and one of the bosses, one of the main characters in the show is like an African guy who runs a Ghanaian restaurant. People would get it. Like, people understand it because that's how it interacts with Chinese people's lives. Is they may go to an African restaurant and they know that there is an Africa town. But the reason it works is not because it's actually related to the African person's experience. It's because it's related to the majority audience's experience. So similarly, when black people in America, this is the problem they have to break through. There are black bosses, there are black entrepreneurs, there are black lawyers, there are black all sorts of people in high levels of society. But if the white people who pay the ticket money don't see the world that way, then those shows don't wind up being made. And it really isn't even having anything to do with black and white, because Hollywood would just as likely, they'd love to take black people's money too. It's just a matter of purchasing power. So in China, the purchasing power is all Chinese people. And if I want to make a comic where I'm just like a dude on a couch, I would just have to go to the expat community, and they better buy all the tickets because Chinese people don't see the world that way. The other thing I've learned is like, this is why stand-up is so magical, is because I stopped doing a lot of those sketches, because when you play a character, it starts getting into these weeds, right? You like, who are you? Like, am I, like, if I'm playing a character, like it would be a relatable character for me to play an English teacher, but I've never been an English teacher. I don't know who an English teacher is like. I just happen to look like one according to Chinese people. But like, if I'm myself, if I'm stand-up, I get to play characters on stage, but I'm still myself. So I don't like, the more me I am, the better I get as a stand-up. So I can go and tell people like, hey, you think I look like an English teacher? I'm not. I can make jokes about that. Like, hey, when I want to play a dude on a couch, I can't do that. Isn't that wacky? People are like, yeah, it is. That's wacky. You can joke about all of the interesting details and be authentic about it. But if you create a story, then people are thinking that your choice of the story is like a value judgment of how you want them to see the world. And it gets very complicated.
And do you think, I mean, sort of to sort of wrap it up at the end here, do you think that, obviously everything's on lockdown right now still? I mean, have the comedy clubs, they're still shut in the US, in Boston, right? You're not.
Everything's shut.
Yeah, China's the same way. Do you know?
China's back on.
Is China back on? Oh, really?
Oh, it's back on for a month and a half. Like all my big TV shows been being filmed. Like all my friends, 10 shows a week now in Beijing for the Chinese scene.
And
everything's on.
So the English language as well, is that on back?
English, they have the mics back. But like the English scene is smaller than it was in say 2016. But whatever is there is kind of back.
Okay. So there is kind of, I guess, so to speak, hope for. Do you think comedy is going to change in China?
This is the thing. I had a very bizarre, pandemic period, even beyond the pandemic part of it, because I worked for 8 years trying to do Chinese comedy, and I did so many live shows. I never really did too much on the internet. And starting I ran a live club, and we had to close the live club because we just couldn't make it work. And then the plan for 2020 was to try to build an online audience and then bring them to the live show. And in January, I started putting up my stand-up bits on TikTok, on the Chinese Douyin, on the Chinese version of TikTok, even just off of nothing, just old video of my stand-up bits cut into 1 minute segments. I had 200,000 fans in a week and a half. It was nuts. And then I went on a TV show, which is like the last top comic of China, the Huanle Xijuren. And I was on that show, and it's like a competition. They had like me face off against like other professional comedians. And I beat this Chinese comedian who was apparently pretty famous. I got more votes than him from the audience, and I wasn't eliminated. And that video happened to air during the Chinese lockdown, so a lot of people saw it. And then while I was here, I did a charity show. While I was stuck in lockdown in February, I did a charity show raising money for Wuhan. I raised $12,000.
I remember that. Yeah, that was a good effort. I mean, it was
way bigger than I thought it would be. Like we sold out.
I mean, hey, way to also get some goodwill from the Chinese. I mean, that's
it was. I mean, I just felt like I was going crazy. It wasn't even like I'm like, oh, I want them to think well of me. It was like all of my friends, the Chinese comedians, were indoors for 30 days in a row. This was before that was normal. So I was like, the world is fucking falling apart. And it struck me, I was literally the only comedian that could do a Chinese comedy show maybe in the whole world.
I think this was this was one of the things that, because COVID, we were in Wuhan when we did the tour, me, Bjarte, and Thoratlet, when we did our China tour in November. Yeah, we went to Shanghai, Ningbo, and we were in Wuhan doing our show on November 13th, 4 days before the first confirmed COVID case took place.
Yeah, four days before
the official. Everyone got a little sick when they got home, but then we went to Beijing, and then but Wuhan was our favorite city. Wuhan
Was
is
that only in November? It feels like fucking 3 years ago.
I know. It's just it feels like, with Tiger King and everything. It feels
Oh
like
my
it's
God.
been years. Like,
Oh my God. But yeah, that's, Wuhan's a great place. I mean, I performed there 3 times.
Well, I mean, it's a badass city. It's
great
where
place.
Chinese punk started. Wu Wei from SMZB. You feel that sort of rebel feeling in Wu. It's like a Detroit almost kind of.
Wuhan is it's like one of the jokes I do there is because the whole city is like under construction because they're building all their subway lines.
Yeah.
So I had a friend from Wuhan that I was talking to about this, and I was like, "How does it feel to live here?" And then she said, like, "Oh, the Wuhan city government has this slogan they put up everywhere, but they're actually completely right because the slogan is Wuhan, different every day." And it's like that's how it feels. It's just different every day. And so anyway, but my point being is all of these things kind of happened in a period of about 6 weeks. I had my own videos, the TV show, and the charity show that I did. The video of that went mega viral. It got like 300 million hits. It was everywhere. It was like just 1 in 5 people in the country knew. It was like it remains, as far as I know, the only thing that was forwarded by both NPR and the Chinese police.
The Chinese police.
I have a screenshot of the Chinese police Weibo with their like 80 million followers. Like 80 million followers.
Get this guy's info right away.
Yeah, no, they were like
search.
So I'm sure that they could still come and find me if they wanted to, but they could always do that. Yeah. And so between that, I shot up to about 2 million fans on TikTok in 6 weeks. And that was like what I needed my whole career, was to have this breakthrough where I could now sell a lot of live shows, and I still have no idea what the hell's going to happen because I have not been able to go back to China to see whether I can still even get in touch with these people. Meanwhile, the way the algorithms on these sites work is that you can't get in touch with your fan base. Like my videos now get less views than they did before I had the 2 million fans sometimes. And it's like, it's nutty. Like, I don't know what will make the algorithm work or not work. And so it's a real interesting question about the viability about where I'm going to be, because on one hand, the way I see the entirety of the comedy world going, it's like, it's not easy to win, but it seems to be very simple. It's like, accumulate your audience across multiple platforms and then bring them to something. Is it a live podcast? Is it a live comedy show? Is it a fan meetup? Is it a show sponsored by a brand? Like, you gotta make the thing, and then you bring them to something that eventually you can make a living off of it. And
that's a perfect way to say it, because I thought the same thing about, the reason I'm trying to get this whole thing started with, because Unplugged Borders was started out as that sort of travel documentary show I was doing, and then I was like, well, I mean, why not do a podcast with it as well? I think at the end of it, there's a period when you start doing comedy or whatever it is you do, music, art, and then you just get to the point where it's like, all right, I don't want this to just be a hobby anymore. How can I make a living?
How do you do the transition?
Right.
And the transition is like so this is where you say, like, what does the future look like? And I don't know. But the future increasingly looks to be kind of like stateless, for lack of a better term, or as open as the internet is open, which is increasingly restricted. So my 2 million fans, I might lose them in 20 days if America actually bans ByteDance.
That's right. They're about to ban WeChat.
Yeah. So depending on how that all shakes out, my 8 years of working and my break might all come to literally nothing.
Oh, come on! They'll have a bigger memory span than that. I mean,
the people might remember, but the value is not in entertaining here or entertaining here. It's the bringing. So it's the wave too. If you can't show that you can reliably, like, even if you can tell a brand reliably, I can bring 500 people to watch this video, but it's reliable, that's more valuable than I've had a 3 million hit video, but I don't know how to do it again. Because they can go to their boss and say, look, we're going to get 500 imprints. What's that worth? It's worth, $200 or whatever. I don't know. It's not worth that much. But the challenge is, how do you live, like, this is the entirety of internet, everything is like, how do you live in a world where the product is given for free, and the reason people like you and follow you is given for free usually, but then there also needs to be somebody that profits at some point. And there's like, how do you, in Chinese, they call it, 变现, like, how do you change the path? How do you change the line from going from this direction to going to that direction and do it in a way that people actually like? So that's an interesting point. Let me plug my computer in so I don't have to die. Yeah, so there we go. So yeah, so for me, part of the challenge is like, what role does China play in my future? Because the world, like, is it possible to be a comedian in a Cold War? Like, if it actually happens, if it gets bad,
I think, hey,
it is funny. It is funny.
Yeah, you could be the Yakov Smirnoff of.
That's true.
I mean, that was fine. You look at old, clips of him doing shows on the, Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my all-time favorite jokes was from Yakov Smirnoff. So a lot of people very surprised when I told them we have comedians in Russia. There are many comedians in Soviet Union. They are dead, but they are there.
Yeah.
Such a simple joke, but it's, I don't know. I think that may be.
It works if you're willing. It works if you're willing to be partisan. So if I'm partisan either way.
I don't think so. I don't think you necessarily have to be. Like, might just be the clear-eyed optimist in me talking, but I think if people get enough, like if people get tired enough of the spat between these countries, at the end, if someone is, just if someone is analytical enough to just make jokes about how ridiculous it is and not how ridiculous this country is or that country is, I think there might be some value in that.
It could be, and the thing that I've discovered from doing so much over the internet, and especially over such a sensitive time period like the last half year, is that the good thing is you don't even need to succeed to succeed. Like, if you make the effort, people appreciate it. And you don't really even need to make the best comedy routine that's ever been made. People just like knowing that somebody is out there trying, Of
course.
And so like whenever I feel, because I put too much pressure on myself, man. Like, this is the problem of lockdown, has not been that it's been uncomfortable. I mean, I sit around, I drink lots of tea, I go and play tennis, I write some comedy from my kitchen. The hard part has been the pressure that we all put on ourselves to continue growing in a time when the world is dying. And because it's a totally reasonable thing to say, like, hey, get through this next year, and that's all you have to do. But I just can't get my brain to work that way. I can't get my brain happy to just kind of float through. It needs to struggle. And so when that happens, the only thing I can think of is like, take the pressure off myself, not by saying it's okay to do nothing, but to say it's okay just to make the attempt.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I can get into that mindset, I actually make better stuff. Like, did you see the video I put up just yesterday of Neymar?
Oh no, I saw the reel. I haven't seen the video yet.
Watch it now and tell me what you think. It's 50 seconds. It's can you get on? It's on my Instagram. But like, it's nothing magic, but I think it's funny. And I just made that yesterday because I had the idea. I sat down, I made it, I edited it, I made a thumbnail, I put it up on 10 platforms, and it's just like. And even though it took a little bit of time, quite a bit of time for a 50-second joke, it's like I felt good about it. Like, it was.
You still? That's what she said.
Yeah, I'm still at what she said on Instagram.
There you go. Oh no! Why isn't Neymar? Not getting audio here. Oh no! Okay.
No audio.
Oh, so you're swapping Neymar for? He's trying to swap. That's good. That's good. Listens to his doctor. Stay indoors. Brazil has too many. Yeah, Brazil is a little fucked, aren't they? Oh yeah, nice throwback to the 7-1 defeat.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, I think there's also something to be said about, the length of videos. We live in the Snapchat, TikTok era where everything needs to be sort of quick. Everything needs to be 10 seconds. Everything needs, I noticed, when I did my Unplugged border shows, the first ones were, 20 minutes. And you're asking a lot for people. I mean, it's like if you're not doing something Netflix quality, and you're asking people a lot to sit and watch your, shitty amateurish video for 20 minutes.
The way I look at this, though, is in some ways it's actually really good, because the worst thing in the world is, like, as comedians, this. The worst thing in the world is watching somebody do a 5-minute set that really is like 40 seconds of good material. Yeah. I would much rather see 40 seconds and you get off stage. I would be like, that guy's a badass. He went up and did 40 seconds and then he left. Can you imagine how badass that would be? It's like, knowing when you have good stuff and stopping is like the definition of being a professional. So
yeah, but that's not what most people who start out. I mean, when you start out, you're so hungry. You think that you are God's gift to comedy.
But that's the reason why when you say the short, like there's a place to live on the internet for everything. Like while TikTok is getting shorter, YouTube is getting longer. Mm-hmm. So YouTube is the algorithm's based off of watch time, and all the videos that used to be 3, 4, 5 minutes are now like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Yeah. But the difference is you now have less kind of shitty 5-minute sets. You have less 5-minute stuff with 40 seconds of content. If you've got 40 seconds of content, bang it out in 40 seconds. And if your 5-minute video couldn't, like, the pace of a 5-minute video isn't really what you're doing, like you're doing a talk show or you're doing a cooking show or whatever, or you're doing something that involves like making like the pacing more chill, do it for 15 minutes. And then you won't get a lot of people to watch the 15-minute video, but by watch time, if you get 1/15 as many people to watch the 15-minute video as the 1-minute video, you're actually doing the same thing, if it makes sense.
Yeah.
So the scary thing about the short platforms, though, is how quickly people come off. Like I have on TikTok, they show you a map, and it's like a XY axis, and they show you the curve of what a viral video looks like in terms of this is 100% of people still watching, this is 0%, and your amount of people still watching goes down as you reach the end of the video. So if you get to the end of the video and 30% of people watch the whole thing through on a short platform, you're like a god. Mm-hmm. A 50-second video, but they make it all the way to the end. Almost nobody does it. 30% would be crazy. A lot of videos get down to like 1%.
Yeah, I've seen that in my analytics. It's always a lot of fun. The average person watched it for 3 minutes and then they went and jacked off or something.
Yeah, but in a short platform, it's literally like the average person watched it for 5 seconds. It's like terrifying. So the part of the change for me has been a recognition and saying, let's not judge this. Because I went for years, I wasn't on TikTok because I just fucking hated it. I hated the idea that I work really hard on this thing and that people are going to look away in 5 seconds. But this is apparently the way the world is. And if you want people to watch, put something interesting in the first 5 seconds.
I mean, it's like you were saying about the audience thing. It's like, this is what the audience sees. This is what they want. And, you can do your own thing and then get a following. But if you want to sell...
So the problem is, and this is why, like, you see so many makeup videos is like
I saw your makeup video. I loved that, man.
It was great, wasn't it?
Great eyeliner. I like the tone. Yeah, great tone.
It was good. I'm not wearing any makeup now because this is an interview, but if I were performing, no. But the reason makeup videos work is that everything about them is internety. It's visual, it's quick, it's immediately noticeable. You can sell shit straight up. People come to you for advice on makeup. If you're a comedian, it's kind of the opposite. Like, you make fun of shit. Like the problem is like getting, having 2 million fans as a comedian, people would approach me to like sell blenders. And I'm like, I can do blender jokes, but I'm not sure how many blenders I'm really going to be able to move, Like, but if I were a kitchen cook, whatever, and a blender brand comes to me, people might actually trust my opinion on what blender to use. And in China, the way the market is going with everybody that does internet stuff, doesn't matter if you're a comedian, doesn't matter if you're a makeup person, everything now is just home shopping network on TikTok.
Yeah,
like
and on WeChat too. I love that. You know, you're talking to like these 21-year-old girls. They're like, "Oh, what do you do for living?" "Oh, I'm a CEO." I'm like, "Oh, let me guess. You sell shit on WeChat." Yeah. CEO.
And you know what? They fucking make money.
Like, you know, I know. I want to make fun of it, but I'm like, you are making so much more money than I am.
The thing that made me think about this with a little bit more space was I had a conversation with somebody who was high up at the Shanghai Media Group, the people that run Donghua Weisha, like the biggest TV station in Shanghai. And he's like, the secret that nobody wants to talk about is half of the money that we make comes from our home shopping shows that we put on the channel. Like all those fancy entertainment shows that are like the big IPs and the big brands with the big stars, they don't bring in the money. What brings in the money is like selling dishwashing detergent to old ladies who actually watch TV now. Because who's the hell is watching TV? You know,
I think South Park did a good episode about that with the home shopping network. It was all old people and
yeah, I'm sure. So it's like, and so the interesting thing is that being a comedian has taught me a very important lesson in life, which is if you put the butts in the seats, you control everything. Donald Trump is a madman, but he gets people out to vote, and that alone allowed him to take over an entire political party.
Like a country, dude.
A country, because he got people, he put the butts in the seats. And so it doesn't matter how fucking crazy you are or what you're saying. If you put the butts in the seats, people will listen to you and people will fall in line behind you and people will fawn over you. And in comedy, it's you know, it's the way the world works.
It's like you've seen the movie Idiocracy, where you know, I think of like two movies, Idiocracy and God Bless America with Bobcat Goldthwait. It's such a, it describes not only America but just the way, I mean, from a daily perspective, most people aren't interested in politics or some very, you know, people like simple. They like the simple. They like the reason Snapchat and TikTok took off was, I think, it's because it's short, it's visual. You know, it's like you feel like a kid again. You're getting flashy things right in your eyes. It's a very simple format to sell. You don't go into detail about something. You know, you work all day, whatever. You come home. You don't want to have to be bombarded with something that's very complex.
That's true, but you know, there's always going to be an audience for the simple and short. And some of those people are the same people that'll watch an hour of Fox News and listen to people blather. Like there's always a market for any number, any given format of thing.
I'm saying right out the gate, you know, you're talking about like selling tickets. I mean, yeah, sure, you could sell. I would say it's easier to initially
it's easier to be short. It's easier to make people move. But I think that we need to recognize this. Like, you know, the people like, you know, on the left in America keep making arguments and trying to tell people about facts.
Yeah, they don't care about facts.
No, like, and this is the interesting thing is that these are the same people that say they like data. And I'm like, look at the data of how you're talking to people. Is there any data to imply it's working? Is there any data to imply that calling people out on the internet and complaining about identity issues is bringing anyone into this camp? If your goal is to say, I've given up on convincing anybody about anything, I'm just doing this to make myself feel good, okay.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Which is what I think a lot of them are. I mean,
it is. But like there's a, you know, and I'm on the left in America for sure, but there's a challenge, like being back here, it's been frustrating of seeing people that believe similar things that I believe and then going about them in ways that seem to be against data. They say they like data, but they won't look at the data of the way they're communicating with people and seeing that it's not working. Because if it was working, I think the ideas are right and the ideas are more closely tied to reality. And if you found a way to do it in a emotionally based way, I think people would be interested. It's like, have you seen anything by the Lincoln Project? Have you seen that?
Yeah, no, I was reading about them in Time Magazine. My mom was pointing that out as well.
Yeah,
I think that is a very essential necessity right now in the United States, which is.
Well, this is the interesting thing about the Lincoln Project is like everybody on the left loves the Lincoln Project. But I'm like, look at what it'd be like to have real first-class propagandists on your side for once.
Yeah.
Like, they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit about being tacky or being over the top.
Who was it who said nobody ever went broke, underestimating the intelligence of the American people?
That's a good quote, but
Yeah.
my favorite is the George Carlin's bit on, like, think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize that means that half of them are stupider than that.
That's a good point. A lot of great points have become. It's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe in it.
Yeah, but I think that the cynicism, the reason, this is the other thing, is coming from China, where you don't hear this stuff, and it's unclear why you don't hear it, although the media is controlled. But the part of the reason why the whole world rags on America is because America has such an open system. It's one of the few countries that has a large population of people willing to actively complain about their country being horrible. There are a lot of places where just people don't do that. And if they do it in their own language. They don't do it in the global language, and they do it in their own papers. They don't do it in the global papers. And so there are lots of problems in America, but ironically, even seeing the craziness of it is kind of refreshing, because it means that people can talk about it. And even people talking about things poorly, there's a chance for success there. But never talking about it, it's like, you've never heard like a couple that's like arguing, and it's like, we were going to divorce and we never talked about the problem, and then it fixed itself. It's never happened once in the history of the world. Sometimes people have fucking blowout fights, get divorced, break up for 6 years, and get back together.
Well, I mean, unless their marriage counselor is Chinese, in which way he would say,
you don't get divorced in the first place.
You don't get divorced. You don't talk about it. If you do, I'll arrest you.
But this is the thing. It's like, there are, like, I'm not going to make a cultural claim about which way is better, but look at the results you get in both ways. The results of not talking about things is less conflict today, but you miss the chance of solving a lot of the big problems. And the problem with America, I mean, there's shit tons of problem with the way that discourse is going on in America, but there are paths to solving some of the problems that exist because that discourse exists. Like, who the hell knows how America is ever going to solve racism, but I guarantee it won't be by never mentioning it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, what worries me about the U.S. is just how many people have guns and how many are angry, and how I think what's going on, right? What really worries me is that there is like a cocktail of unemployment, very violent. And I mean, a lot of just in the last few days and weeks, man, just like Portland, Kenosha,
America is a violent place, man. Like, America is a country that was founded essentially on violence and protecting yourself from the other, whether it was the Indians or whether it was from wherever.
But whether it's a real threat or a perceived threat, I mean, there's a point I made in my new episode of Unplugged Borders came out yesterday about the United States. And one of the points I was making is that while I was back in Northfield, Minnesota, I was mentioning the Jesse James raid. So Jesse James tried to rob the bank in Northfield, Minnesota, and they got their asses kicked. And it's a story where sort of because all the townspeople in Northfield got their guns and they started firing on the bank robbers, and then two of them got killed and they left. I said it's a story that reads like porn.
It's like, if you really think about it.
Yeah, no, but it reads like porn. It reads like porn fiction to the NRA, because that is, it's a situation where everybody's minding their own business all of a sudden, and then the bad guys show up, and the good guys have to get the guns, and they have to. And I think that is the reason why that's such a popular story, at least in Northfield, is that it really feeds into the ethos that is America. They love this type of story where the people who own the guns are so good, they're just normal citizens. And then one
good guy with a gun is the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun.
And I think, yeah, exactly. And I think that's how they view every situation.
Sure. But, I think one of the things that living abroad has been good for me is that when you go to a country like China with 1.4 billion people, and you actually live there, you get to see like, oh, the Northerners are different from the Southerners. The city people are different from the countryside people. And then because it's not your country, you kind of have to chill out and just accept the world as it is. You have to say that's the way it is. And that's the way it is. And for whatever reason, part of the problem of being in America is it's so much harder to just accept that about my own country. Like, these people have the same passport as me, and they just think very different things about me when it comes to guns. And
I don't think those people would have passports, to be honest.
Well, that's a good point. They were born in the same country as me, and they're the same citizen. It's the same country.
Yeah, I mean,
And
their idea of a culture trip is going to Tijuana.
yeah, and so this is the thing that I think is difficult is like if you want to change that, and I would love to change the gun culture in this country if I could wave a magic wand, because it's mad. It's like, there are plenty of ways that you can be a gun enthusiast and be able to have, access to a firearm through a firing range or any number of things that don't involve the good guys with the gun who solve the problem. And there's a lot of room there. But the big thing is like a lot of people who are on the left, they look at the people on the right and they just can't communicate with them. It's too painful. It's too difficult. And so they just communicate with the people that already agree with them. And it's just like, especially living abroad, it's like, who's going to help Americans if Americans don't help Americans? No one's waiting to save us.
That's a good point.
It's like I saw an article of, McSweeney's, the comedy journal.
Yeah.
I love McSweeney's. Hilarious. Somebody wrote an article. It's like, it was like a parody. It was like a satire. It's like, welcome to the middle, a land where dialogue actually reaches conclusions. And it was like making fun of people in the middle. And I was like, I want to write the other one. I'm like, welcome to extremism land, where you yell at the other side long enough, they actually listen to you. Where in the hell of history does this ever happen? Yeah, being in the middle, you'll fail 95 times out of 100, but there are 5 times that you'll convince somebody. Extremists can't fucking convince other extremists of anything. It's like
I went to a Black Lives Matter, rally, but then a guy, he hit me with his fucking pickup truck and shot paintball guns at my friend from his pickup truck waving a Trump flag. And I thought, you know what? I never thought of it that way.
But it's not that. Like that's the straw man argument. Like reaching across the aisle doesn't mean that the extremists on the left reach to the extremists on the right. But the thing is, I've seen my friends and family and all the people on the left go further and further and further left, and do so in a way that doesn't acknowledge that it's a tit for tat, man. Like part of the reason the right is so far right is because people on the left just assert that the world is the way it is on the left, and they don't see that the extremification of the left is part of what's causing the extremification of the right. Yeah. Now, I know a lot of people on the left will say like, hey, well, extreme left in America is like centrist in Europe, which is probably true, but we don't live in Europe.
Here's a good way to answer. Here's a good way to answer that, because I hear that argument as well. It's like, yes, left and right in Europe definitely is a lot more chill than left and right in the U.S. That being said, we also aren't hamstrung by this whole concept of just having 2 parties.
Yeah.
Having a parliamentary system where you have 4, 6, 8, sometimes 10 parties really is it doesn't polarize you.
How many parties are there in Iceland? It's 130,000 people.
No, 330,000.
Oh, 330. I'm thinking of Reykjavik.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, Reykjavik's about 150,000. So we have what's gone up and down. We used to only have 4, and then we had 8. I think we have 6 now.
Don't you have a pirate party?
We do, yeah. That's one of them.
Are they like real pirates, or are they like ironic pirates?
They're both.
They're both. They're like, yeah, I'm gonna kill you. Isn't that hilarious?
I mean, they're everything you'd expect your 17-year-old emo nephew who just hates capitalism would be.
Scandinavian emo people really go hard. Like.
The Finnish and Norwegian.
Norwegian, I have a feeling like if I went into any forest in Finland and just wandered long enough, I'd come onto a photo shoot. That's the way I feel.
You see them sacrificing goats at a metal festival.
But then be like really polite. They're like, "Oh, how you doing?"
Welcome to Finland.
I mean, part of me is even thinking like, this post-China world is like, maybe I should go and live in Europe for a couple of years and see what the hell life is like there. And I'm sure there are Chinese people in Europe.
Yeah, there's plenty of Chinese people in Europe. And I think, to be honest, because we've been talking about this for a while now, you coming to do a show in Iceland.
Yeah, I got to come.
I mean, because you've been floating this idea, and I know the Secret Cellar has been doing as well, because we're trying to get sort of more asses in seats from the local market. And there are obviously a lot of Chinese people who live in Iceland, people at the embassy, and I know like half of them. So I don't think it would be enough for me to just go ahead and do it. I think obviously we'd need Shang, and we'd need,
let's do it all, man.
Yeah.
Why not?
I really
we
think
could
we
be
should.
the best Shang people in Iceland.
Yeah, I mean, the competition's fierce, but I think we can do it.
This is the way to succeed: is to go to a place where nobody is trying. That's we should actually do that though. Like, if we do a Xiangcheng show, I can send you stuff ahead of time, and you can memorize the lines, and we could do a couple minutes of Xiangcheng together.
Dude, that's a bucket list thing I want to do.
You should do it. I don't know if you can get a dagua, like the robe made in Iceland, but
Oh, I'll see. I got some connections.
We have a dagua that's all that sweater, like the sweater you had. It's a sweater all the way down. You had this great sweater when you came on my show.
Oh yeah, the wool sweater.
The wool sweater, but just like that
would be like do a fusion of Icelandic wool sweater with the
I think that would be great.
That would be awesome. That would be something I'd have to. Yeah, we'd have to see if we can get that made. Jesse,
I have to record. I actually have to record my own show.
I gotta. We're doing a show tonight as well at the Cellar. Jesse, it was been a lot of fun talking to you, man. It was. I really think we should, like I said, let's see if we can plan something. Let's see. I know, obviously you'd have to quarantine if you come to Europe, but this is gonna work, man. I know it always has.
Can I get in if I did come and I quarantined? Could I get into the country right now as an American?
Not as a tourist.
Not as a tourist. If I were to come to a show, like, is there a license that you could issue to me that it could actually happen?
You could. I mean, if you, but I mean, the reason is you need a reason. So it's sort of like you'd have to ask for an exemption, and then you have to ask the Department of Immigration to ask for an exemption. And then
if the like Confucius Institute or somebody asked for that, could they get it?
It could be. I mean, let's see. Let's try to pull our strings with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And
they probably wouldn't. They probably I think 14 days of paying for an Icelandic hotel to quarantine though would probably blow the money out of it. So.
You'll make the money back in 2052.
Yeah, right. I need to get a Harkal brand to sponsor the thing.
There you go. Jesse, so good to hear from you, man. Let's stay in touch. All the best to you, and we'll have a good weekend, man.
Yeah, you too. Have a good one, man.
All right,